As I told you this morning, back in 1988, I was a young 29-year-old driving up the side of Lookout Mountain to address 216 Poco, Cal. You probably know who lived there. Over the years, I've made quite a few drives up Lookout Mountain to get things signed or to pick up books, posters, or correspondence that Clive had set aside for me. I've also been to his classic car warehouse on occasion before it was open to the public, and I remember him perched contentedly on a nearby curb, signing a box of books for me. For nearly 20 years, Clive, I have followed your career, whether it has been searching for shipwrecks, the publication of a new book, or the acquisition of another classic car. All in all, it's been a fun ride and a great adventure for me. For better or for worse, Clive, you have been a big part of my life. And my point for rambling on and on is that everybody I believe in this room feels the same way. Amen. Amen. From all over the world, we've come together this weekend to honor, pay tribute, to say thank you for giving us 30 years of reading and collecting enjoyment. We all look forward to another 30 years. So as a way of expressing our heartfelt thanks, we are honored to present to you this award that simply reads Clive Cussler, Grandmaster of Adventure, presented by the Clive Cussler Collector Society, October 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor.
For a guy who came from nothing and brought it with him, this is a real treat. I wish to thank everybody. I'm really touched, and Wayne, and I can't say enough. I'm so grateful. I know when I first sat down to write, I had no idea where it was going. In fact, my wife told me, she said, "Don't get your hopes up, nothing will ever come of it." But yeah, it was can I ask one thing? Is there anybody here that's heard me before? Oh, God. I can't tell the same stories. Oh, okay. So, anyway, the one they always ask me to tell, because I've had to tell it more times than Judy Garland sang Over the Rainbow, is how I got an agent. And I've had the same agent now for, 36 years, I think, Peter Lampak. And I'd written 2 manuscripts, and I was working in advertising then up in L.A. And so I thought, well, now I need an agent, because I'd been sending one of them in, which was Pacific Vortex, and getting it rejected. And then I finished Mediterranean Caper, and I thought, well, I need an agent. And rather than go through all the, letters of query and synopsis and all that stuff, I was producing radio and TV commercials, so I knew casting directors for talent, but I didn't know any for literary agents. So I contacted them, like William Morris and a few others, and got names of about, 15, 20 agents, literary agents in New York. And then I went to the art director of the agency I was working with and had him make up this letterhead. And then I had it printed on 1,000 sheets of stationery and 1,000 envelopes, and it said Charles Winthrop Agency. I thought Winthrop was a classy name, and I lived on Winthrop Drive when I was a kid. And so I put my dad's address and no phone number. And so I then sent a letter to the first name on the list, which was Peter Lampak. And I said, "Dear Peter, as you know, I primarily handle motion picture and television screenplays. However, I've run across a couple of book-length manuscripts which I think have a great deal of potential. I would like to pursue them, but as we discussed, I'm retiring. Would you like to take a look at them? So I mailed it off, and 10 days later, Dad says, there's a letter for you here from New York. And so I opened it up. Dear Charlie, yeah, on your say-so, I'll take a look at the manuscript. Signed, Peter Lampak. So I mailed off the manuscripts to Peter. And I guess about 3-4 weeks went by, and Dad says, there's a letter for you from New York. So I opened it up. Dear Charlie, the first manuscript's kind of mediocre. The second one's really good. Where can I sign Clive Cussler? And I thought, it's got to be harder than this. So then I sent another letter telling Peter Lampak where he could find Clive Cussler. Now, I had 997 envelopes and 997 sheets of this stationery. So I threw away the envelopes, and I write a book called Iceberg on the back of that stationery, Charlie Winthrop stationery. So years went by. Peter, bless his heart, William Morris, after 3 years, he couldn't get me published, and his bosses said, get rid of Cussler, he's not going anywhere, and Peter hung in. And finally we got published by Mediterranean, or Pyramid, a little third-rate paperback house on Mediterranean Caper. And then Iceberg with Dodd Mead, they printed 5,000 copies, sold 3,200, and you all know what the price of the signed, pristine copy of Iceberg goes for. And so then came Raise the Titanic, and which we all call the breakthrough book. So that all worked out. It was Viking paid me $7,500 for it, and a British editor from Macmillan, London, happened to be visiting, an editor friend in New York at Viking, heard about it and said, oh, run me off a manuscript. It was Titanic was our ship. I'll read it on the flight back. And he did. And they went into a little bidding war in London and went up to 22,000, which was a nice piece of change, really. And I'd been on unemployment, so anything was, I'd take anything I could get. And so that kind of impetus boomeranged back to the United States, and then they ran into the paperback auction. And my agent described how that worked and what have you, and I didn't have any high hopes of anything. And my wife was working at the time as a secretary for Memorex here in Denver. And as she walked out that door that morning to go to the office, I said, oh, when it gets up to 250,000, I said, I'll call you and you can, quit. And we had a hearty laugh over that. About 10 o'clock, I called her up and I said, you can quit. She walked in, gave him 2 weeks' notice, and we never looked back. In fact, I bought a used Fiat sports car and a new refrigerator. So years later, actually a year or two later, we sold the rights to the movies for Raise the Titanic. And we happened to be in New York, so Peter and his wife and my wife and I went out to celebrate. Now this was 6 years later. And I had never told Lampak the story of Charlie Winthrop. And I was sitting there with my wife, and I looked at her and I said, I think the time has come. And with great trepidation, figuring I'm his biggest client now, he's not going to dump me. So I told Peter the story of Charlie Winthrop. And when I finished, he sat there blank. Then he laughed himself under the table. And when he recovered, he said, oh my God, I always thought Charlie Winthrop was some guy I met when I was drunk at a cocktail party. So, and fun things can happen too. I was on book tour with the book, and Leon Uris had come out with a book called Trinity, and he was #1, I was #2, and I could never knock him off. And I followed him at a little TV station in Richmond, Virginia. And the authors usually went there because the station went all around Virginia, plus the fact the fellow that owned it was a big book collector, and he pushed authors and really did a great job of promoting books. So it's a small station, and I waited while he shot the commercial, and then I went under the camera and went up on the stage and in the chair, and